Good morning, class. Welcome once again to POS 114 class, simply titled The Citizens and the State. In our last class, that study section 1, we look at the concept of citizenship. We briefly consider the conceptualization of the state. We look at how an alien can become citizens, and we also try to distinguish between an alien and citizens, and also talk about the process through which citizens of another state can acquire a citizenship of his or her chosen state. So today, in study section 2, we shall be looking at the concept of state and sovereignty. And I want to believe, and I believe you all going to agree with me, that virtually every member of this class must have come across the concept of state. And these are the terms we use in our day-to-day interactions. So is not a new concept. In the same way, when we talk about sovereignty, so we are going to be providing a sunset definitions or conceptual clarification of state in itself. We are also going to look at the difference between state and nation. Don't forget, these two terms are being used interchangeably as if they literally mean the same thing, whereas they mean different things. So state is more is all encompassing, under which the nation exists. We are still going to get there. Don't let me bore you with more story for now. Then lastly, we are going to talk about the sovereignty. We are going to define sovereignty. We are also going to talk about type of sovereignty, and we are going to look at the relevance of sovereignty in the modern day politics, the state sovereignty in the modern day politics, given the happening here and there in the global politics. Now let us start with the state and with the definition of state. It says state can be defined as people occupying a given territorial locations with their own law, government, and which it is assumed to be free from external influence or control. So a state can be defined as people occupying a given territorial boundary or locations with their own law, government, and it is assumed the state is free from external influence or control. From this definition, 4 key issues of state emanate. What I'm saying in essence is that from our definitions, we say a state is people occupying a given territorial location or boundary, and they have their law and government, and it also assumes such entity should be free from external control or influence. So from this definition, there are 4 key terms that comes to mind that could actually tell us or signify whenever we see an entity to be referred to as a state. So, and one of those things is the population, people. The state must be occupied by a sizable number of people in terms of populations. It must also have government. The engine or machinery of the state is government. The state itself cannot function without government that implement its programs or policies. Then the state must have a given or defined territorial boundary, and that is what also makes this state to be different from nation, because a state is territorially defined. It does not cut across into other state jurisdictions, unlike nations. When you are talking about Yoruba nation, you can find Yoruba in Cuba, can find them in Brazil, can find them in Benin Republic, and so on, and so, even Togo. So, but you cannot find another Nigeria state elsewhere apart from here. So we can also talk about the sovereign thing. You know, from the definition we talk about, that is also pointing to sovereign thing, that it enjoys supremacy of control over a given jurisdiction or territory. And let us look at the attribute of the state holistically. When you are talking about attribute, you are talking about features, you are talking about distinctive traits that can be used to identify a particular entity. So when we talk about state, there are many attributes that can be used to identify entity called state. First is ubiquity of the state. I know this term sounds strange, but when you hear ubiquity, it's also talking about ubiquitous. That means state can be found everywhere. State is everywhere you go, you must be under one state, under the control of one state or the other. There is no space under this planet that is not occupied by a particular state. So that is why the popular saying that every human being, it's a political animal, must be operating within a purview or jurisdiction control of a particular state, irrespective of the location. It is only a beast, and I want to believe that even a beast is located in a particular place, which means that place, though the government might not be exercising control over its activity, but is also locating or is located within a given territorial boundary of a state. So we also talk about universality of state jurisdictions. When you hear universality of state jurisdiction, it means that within a given state or a given territorial boundary of a state, state enjoy control over everything, either over the air, on the land, or under the ground, or in the sea. So the power of a state cut across the airspace, the land, the territorial waters, even under the ground. The state can ban another flight from other country from flying over its airspace. It has that power, and it can also stop vessels from flying through its territorial water. So it enjoys enormous powers. So we also talk about compulsory nature of the state. You know, and this is what makes state so powerful, and also a features that distinguish state from nations or from non-state actors. Let me put it that way. When it comes to issue of state, citizen has no choice. They have no choice. You cannot choose whether you want to be a citizen of this country or the other. Even when you choose to naturalize your citizenship to another country, you are still going to be under the control of the country you have chosen, your newly chosen country. So which make it is a compulsory association for every human being. State enjoy compulsory association. So in a nutshell, no individual citizen can exempt his or herself from the state jurisdictions. Let us look at the functions of the state. State does not just exist. It must be seen to be carrying out certain functions. So in this regard, the function of the state are grouped into two, which we can referred to as positive functions and negative functions. When you are talking about negative function, you are talking about the ability of the state to maintain laws and order. And you know, human being by nature, or we are lawbreakers, because obeying law restricts our freedom and movement, and also restricts certain rights ordinarily that we would have loved to enjoy, even at the expense of the state or other citizens. So, and when state is trying to enforce law, trying to maintain law and order, it also means the lawbreaker will be brought to book. The criminal will be mailed to face certain punishment. The armed robbers, the kidnappers, the fraudsters, they will be apprehended and be prosecuted. Some of them might be put into jail. The murderer can be sentenced to life imprisonment or death, or to death sentence. So all these things, because they serve as a punitive measure, make us to group it as a negative function of the state, though in a recent they are not actually negative. We also talk about positive function of the state. These are the function of the state that entails molding the moral integrity of the citizens by ensuring that citizens obey certain rules and regulations, comply, respect the integrity of the state, and also the ability of the state to provide social amenity or infrastructural amenity like good road, pipe-borne water supply, educational facilities, and so on and so forth. Because this bring about relief or pleasures, or it aim at advancement of the human capital. So that is why it is categorized as positive functions of the state. We now want to look at difference between state and nation. Within a state, because don't forget initially we say state is all encompassing, is bigger than the nation. Within a state, people share both homogeneous and heterogeneous attributes. For instance, in Nigeria, we have over 250 ethnic tribes and languages, which means there is no single nations that band people together within the country. We have several nations like Yoruba nation, Hausa nation, Igbo nation, and so on and so forth. That is why the Igbo are shouting they have Biafra, they want to secede. Yoruba are shouting Yoruba nation, and so on and so forth. We also have other smaller nations. So whereas in the nations, the people within there share homogeneous attributes in terms of culture, social cultural background, orientations, and language. So that's why we can say Yoruba nations. It is believed all the people within that nations, like people from Ekiti, Ondo, Ogun, Oyo, Lagos, Osun, and so on and so forth, they share the same socio-cultural background, the language, belief system, and so on and so forth. Even religion, before the advent of both Christianity and Islam, you are all traditional worshippers. So another difference between state and the nation is that state enjoy sovereignty. Don't forget, when we are defining sovereignty, we are talking about supremacy of the state over its territorial boundary and its people. It enjoys that power to make law, to punish offender, to do as constitutional prescribed. So unlike the nation that operates within the state, though it does not enjoy that kind of attribute. State does not have the supremacy of power
or absolute power over his people. The people and that nation are subject of the state. They were subjected to state control, state rules and regulations. Another key distinguished factor between state and nation is that the nation does not enjoy divine territorial boundary. It is a kind of it does not enjoy divine territorial boundary, unlike states. The territorial boundary of a state can be clearly identified, whereas when it comes to nations, you can find, for instance, you can find Yoruba people outside Nigeria. You can find them in Cuba. You can find them in Haiti. You can find them in Benin Republic. You can find them in Togo. You can find them in Brazil. There they are also nation on their own, relating within their homogeneous group. So it's a key distinguishing factors. We now want to talk about sovereignty. Sovereignty. Say sovereignty can be defined as supremacy and absolute power of a state over its citizens and territory, with the assumption that it's also free from external intervention, influence or control. Supremacy can be defined or described as the supreme and absolute power of the state over its citizens, is given territorial boundary, and with the assumption that it's also free from external influence, control or interference. Why I'm using assumption is that most states are not actually free from external control. Some states cannot survive without interventions of Western world in terms of aid, medical grant, financial, economy, and so on and so forth. That's why I'm using as it's also assume. So we want to talk about type of sovereignty. We have two major type of sovereignty: legal and political sovereignty. When you are talking about legal sovereignty, you are talking about the power given to legislature to make law, and that law is bound on every entity within that given territorial boundary of the state. We also have political sovereignty. This is the power of electorate to vote a particular government or party into power, and to also vote them out when they are not doing the bidding of the people. Then we want to talk about the location of sovereignty. We said sovereignty is the supremacy of the state law over its citizens and is given territorial boundary, and with the assumption it's also free from external influence or control. Where are these sovereignty located within the state? It is located within the three arms of government. That is legislature, the judiciary, the legislature that make law, the judiciary that adjudicate or interpret the law, and the executive that implement the law. They also talk about the limitation of the state sovereignty. There are certain things that put limitations or hindrances to the level at which the state will be able to exercise its sovereignty. And this factor as follow: the type of government being operating in that particular country. We have unitary system of government. We have federal system of government. Under the federal system of government, the power is shared among different subunits of the government. The power is shared among the local government, the state government, and the federal government. So the three units of government must all, in most cases, must agree upon a particular issue. They must deliberate over particular issues and reach a consensus before such can be made to become law. The constitution also clearly specify the duty and function and the power of each either unit of government, the local, the state, and the federal, and the arms of government like the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. It clearly specify the powers and the extent to which they can enjoy certain power in relation to the state and the people. Then the military in power, and this is important, especially as the Africa has started witnessing another waves of military coup. So, it is a norm when military seize power. They normally relegated constitutions whereby they adopted decree are not meant to protect the citizens' right, because they are not going to deliberate issues with civilians. The issues will be deliberated within the military hierarchy, and decision will be reached within few people, which can be at the detriment of the constitutions and the people or the state itself. The custom and traditions. The custom and tradition also place certain limitations to the extent at which sovereignty can be enjoyed within a given state. In the sense that, and don't also forget that both custom and traditions, they are part and parcel of the constitutions under which a state is meant to govern. So even when states want to exercise its sovereignty over a given space within its territorial boundary, it must also take into consideration note of the custom and tradition being practiced in that particular locality, in order not to create child and civil unrest. So the military agreement or pact, this is also key in the sense that in the modern day politics, states often enter into different treaty or agreement. Could be military agreement or economic treaty, and this treaty can in a way hinder the extent to which state can enjoy sovereignty. For instance, if a government or a state enter into military pact or agreement with another country, maybe if there is external aggression on either of the state in agreement, the other one must be willing to help in terms of fighting war for that particular state in which it has entered agreement. So whether the state is willing to do so, the agreement has already compelled the state to do it, because such international pact or agreement is also banned by international law. So the state will now have to mobilize its military resources, its military men, and other resources to support the country in which it has entered military agreement with. And let us talk about the relevance of state sovereignty in the modern day politics. It's also important. We are saying sovereignty also connotes the state freedom from external control, influence, or interference. Are they really the case in the modern day politics? Then we might be considering the issues of international election observations. When you look at election is purely a domestic affair. But in the contemporary global politics, the international community have started sending election observer to observe election in another country and to adjudge that election as either free, fair, or marred with irregularity and fraud. And their pronouncement also have a way it has impact in how the government is going to function. Their pronouncement of election being marred with irregularity and fraud can spell a doom to that particular country conducting election. It can instigate other country from blocking their aid or other support that the country have been enjoying initially before their election is pronounced as fraudulent. Also look at the role of United Nations, particularly the United Nations Security Council, how they can meddle into, how they have been meddling into internal polity within a particular given country. Look at what happened in the case of Iraq and United States of America, when the US alleged Saddam Hussein of stockpiling nuclear weapon or weapon of mass destruction, in which that issue was deliberated upon in the Security Council. The United States was adamant, and it went ahead to invaded Iraq, dethroning and dethrone Saddam Hussein. And the Security Council was unable to stop them because this is the operation at the level of Security Council does not go by military and by the democratic dictate. Even though they are 5 permanent members, it will have been ordinarily assumed that if the issue is subject to voting and the 3 people agree to a particular thing and 2 other people have different opinion, the opinion of the 3 should carry the day. That's not the case in United Nations Security Council. If only one person stand against the decision of the 4 others, that issue is not going to see the light of the day. So even the concept of global citizens, it is assumed that every citizens across the world, they are also, irrespective of your country of origin, you are also a global citizen. That is why the issue of human rights has also been globalized. If a citizen of a I want to vividly recollect the issue that pertained to a female, forgot the name, in which the girl was subject, maybe they want to send her into prison or death, where the international community rose against that decision, especially to the state that is trying to implement that was trying to implement Sharia law over the case of that young girl. So the issues, the concept of global citizen is also a major issue that is currently putting limitation to the influence or the power of the state over its citizens. The state must also talk consciously when it comes to issues of human rights, even though it may have to do directly with the citizens, but there will be reactions from international community. I think I would love to stop here, and I will actually like to encourage you, if you have any question, observations, or comment, please don't hesitate to send your questions. Have a nice day.